usages. But because I've done it manually, I'm now in this situation where the class name doesn't match the file name. So again, Alt-Enter. There is an option saying rename file to match type name, and that's updated it. So I realized I hadn't actually shown that refactor, which is one I use quite often earlier on in the course. I thought I'd just show it then. So obviously normally you do Control-R to rename it, but I just thought I'd do that. So that's renamed. We've got our feature branch now, so let's commit that before we continue. So over here, you've got this commit pane. Now it doesn't actually show a shortcut next to it, but I happen to know it's Control-Alt-K. I'm not sure why it didn't show the hotkey next to it. And this is how you commit in Rider. And you can see by pressing that, this has got focus straight away. And it's automatically checked my file. So going back to our code, we're coding away Control-Alt-K, fix existing test name or class name. So Control-Alt-K literally just typed it straight away. I can reach for the mouse and do commit, or I can do Control-Enter. And that's committed it straight away. And I can press escape to bring focus back to my code. So you can see by using this inline in your IDE, it's not really taking you out of the zone. You're not alt-tabbing or switching to a different Git GUI or the command line or whatever. You're doing it whilst you're coding. So that really encourages staying in the zone, but also committing often as you're working. And you can see that appeared down here in my feature branch. So now because the requirement is a new endpoint, I'm going to do Shift Alt and L to show the current file in Solution Explorer. I'm going to do Control C, Control V. So that's going to copy that file. And let's call it, so the requirement was an endpoint that returns hello Dome Train. So let's do that. Endpoint tests. And I'm just going to copy that name and put it into here because I did copy the file. And then let's just close this out of the way. So the only change I really need to make here is that the endpoint should be hello Dome Train. So we've now got a failing test. I'm not going to run that because in the next module we'll talk about tests, but now just know that we've got a failing test. So I want to commit that. So Control-Alt-K, add failing test. Control-Enter. And we can see this failed because it wasn't selected automatically. That's because it's a new file. If I click here and add it, then we can do commit. So now we want to create the new endpoint. So Alt and F1 to bring up Solution Explorer. I want to go, let's just copy and paste my demo controller. And it was hello Dome Train controller. I'm going to copy this because as we saw last time, because I've just copied and pasted the file, it's got the wrong file name. So I'm going to paste over the top of that. And that's fine. So let's commit again, Control, Alt, and K. And I can type add and then paste hello Dome Train controller, Control and Enter. And again, we need to select it. Commit. So let's do a few other changes. So endpoint test, let's say that I'm just going to duplicate this and say content.read as string async. I just need to await the thing. And then should be hello Dome Train. And then Control Alt and K again. Update test to return string and Control Enter. So it went from passing to failing. So if I go over to the controller and get that to return hello Dome Train, Control Alt K, make test pass, Control Enter. So you can see how I'm staying in the editor and it's very easy to do very frequent commits. If I do Alt 9 now, we can see all those commits I've just done. So I won't make any more changes because that's a good example of just doing regular commits. I just want to at this point show a few things over here about committing. So you've got this cog window. This shows a few options. I don't really change them, but this is of interest, the check to do. Now later on in the course, we're going to talk about to-dos. Down here, this one, this is the to-do pane and you can configure various to-dos. I tend to have one, if I go to filters, called Dan, and I added this myself, Dan colon. So I tend to encode, say I, let's go to the tests, and I want to do a to-do comment. something like that. Add unhappy path tests. But because that matches my to-do comment, it's then come up in this list. But if I just close this, if I go to commit that and say add comment and control enter, then it's popped up here on the bottom right. Just a subtle pop-up saying that there's a to-do comment in there. I wouldn't want it to be in your face and not subtle because I commit often. But at the point I want to push, so let's talk about pushing. Again, up here we can do that, and we can do push or Control Shift and K. And then we get the option to push, and we can do like a force push. But at this point, when I push, this is a bit more in your face. It's red, it's showing that the commit has a to-do comment. So, and I can review it here, and then I can decide, oh, actually, I had forgotten there was that to do there. I don't want to commit this temporary code. So that's really useful. Another way you can deal with temporary code is Rider has a concept of change lists. And we can see we've got this changes here. But if I right click, I can say create a new change list. Let's call this temp and then enter. So one of these will be the default change list. So when I created that new one, I didn't tick set active. So this is the active one. So if I make any changes, that's the change list it's going to appear in. But say I didn't want this committed at all, and it was just, I wanted it locally, but I want to commit often, but I don't want that committed. Let's just go back to Git. I'm just going to right click and say reset and do a mixed reset, just to undo that commit so we're back like we were. So we've now got this change, which if I click on it, we can see that's the diff. If I drag that over to this change set, so it's now in here, so that's this comment, then I can carry on working. If I make some other change, whatever it is, then you can see this appears in changes. So this is the one that if I'm here and I control Alt and K and do some commit, then my temporary change set isn't ticked. So it's not going to commit that. So that's a really useful way of having a bunch of temporary changes you don't want committing in a different change list so that you can carry on committing often without committing those temporary changes. And there's various other use cases for change lists as well. It basically just allows you to have your different changes grouped together so that you can commit them individually. And it's worth pointing out that if you've used Git, you probably know about the concept of staging a change before you create a commit. So Rider kind of hides that away from you. If you do want to do that, you can go to the settings, so Control Alt and S. You can go to version control, Git, and you can turn this on. Note that by turning on the staging area support, then it will disable change list support. So you do have that option. But let's get rid of this change. If I right click and say roll back, so that's basically discard, or Control Alt Z. So I can discard those changes. And it's actually asking me saying that the temp change list is no longer used. Do you want to remove it? So yeah, let's do that. And whilst we're talking about committing, another thing you can do is you can see these checkboxes here. If I just close this down and make a few more changes. So imagine, let's just get rid of that. So I've got no pending changes. If I go to like program, let's get rid of this for a sec. Imagine I've got a file with multiple changes in. So let's just say my method one. Let's put this down here somewhere. So I've got something like this, and then Control Alt K, it's ticked it all. If I click on here, you can see it's got them all ticked, but I can choose to untick some stuff. And you can see that over here, this has become a minus sign to show that we're not committing the full file's changes. So that allows you to do like partial commits of some changes in a file. I can right click and do revert for just that section, or you can highlight and right click and revert, or move to another change list. So it's quite flexible for just committing parts of a file if you need to. Again, let's discard that, right click and roll this back. So Alt F9, let's revisit the log again. So I want to show a few extra things whilst we're here. In the settings, you've got these options. On single click, update branch filter, or navigate the log to branch head. This one is the default. I would recommend changing to this. What this does is when you click the branches here, you can see that it highlights that commit in the log. So that's really useful if you're working in a team and there's lots of different feature branches, just being able to click around. Another thing that's really useful is if you double click. So I mentioned about these filters here before, and you've got your branch filter. If you double click on a branch, then that filters by that branch. So that's a quick way of making this view much simpler. So you're just looking at the branch you're working with. You can also do this drop down and you can select whatever branch you want to filter by. You also, if you favorited anything, so if let's say my new endpoint is a favorite, and say main is a favorite as well. So you can favorite them by just clicking the star icon. So if I go away and come back, you'll see that I can filter by favorites now. And you can see here it shows head or main or my feature branch. So that's really useful for giving you really good control over what you're viewing in your log. Some other nice bits of functionality, you can right click on a commit and say show repository at revision. And then what this does is it actually shows the entire repository at that point in time of that commit, which is really handy. You can click on and you can look and even view it in the editor, what the code base looked like at that point in time. Also very similar, if you want to compare two commits, you can control click the two commits and you can right click and you can say compare versions, and that brings up the diff up here. So again, you can click through. So I think that was a new file. If I click here, find something with a different solution, here we are. So it shows the differences. So you can click through and view them here as well, which I find is a really nice way of diffing two commits, especially if you're working on a feature branch which has lots of commits and you want to see all of your changes. So as an example, let's select main, which is what I branched off, and let's select the head of my feature branch, right click and say compare versions. Then I've got this up here so I can see everything in my feature branch. So even it says renamed from unit tests. So it's told me in English what's changed. If I go to one of these and double click, that was a new file, or these are both new files. If it wasn't, it would show the diff. Other things we can do with the history, if you've got, let's just take one of these, and if you right click on a file, you can say history up to here, and that will show like the log of just that file, which is quite useful. Another option is in your editor, you can do Git annotation. So you can right click on the gutter and choose annotate with Git blame, and it shows, this is a bad example because there's no changes. Let's choose something else. Let's do the controller and then right click and annotate with Git blame. So you can see slightly different color. That was a different